The Yu-Gi-Oh! Trading card game is one of the most strategic, intensely gratifying card games out there, rewarding players with innovative deck building, shrewd technical play, and boundless game knowledge. However, new and aspiring players still face arguably the biggest barrier to entry for competitive play, the extremely steep price points for the most powerful cards available. But what if we tried to remove that barrier? In this series, we're going to be maximizing the value of every penny at our disposal to see how well we can perform on a constrained budget. Each season, we'll be investing a baseline of $50 USD into an affordable deck core comprised of the most cost-effective singles on TCG player. For just an additional $10 per week, we'll continually expand on that core, transforming our build into the most competitive deck possible. Welcome to Rise of the Budget Duelist. Well, here we are in week number 6 of the series. If you guys are wondering what happened last episode, if you want a short recap, this happened where we managed to pull these two ultis right here, which I'm not gonna lie, I'm still extremely astounded that this even happened to begin with. It feels really, really surreal, and of course, I'm just super grateful this happened. Really was just a heart of the cards moment, but things like this can and do happen. That being said, however, it does pose a very important question for this series, how it pertains to the budget and things of that nature. So as of me recording this right now, I still am working on editing episode number 5. Therefore, I haven't quite come to a decision just yet, and I will be asking for you guys' suggestions in the comments below. Of course, by the time this episode goes up, I probably will have made a decision by then, because I will come to that in episode number 7. But again, I will be reading your guys' comments intently, so be on the lookout for, again, next week's episode when I do, in fact, come to a decision. But enough about these two, let's put these off to the side for now, because we gotta talk about what's gonna happen this week. Now, given what I just said, I will simply just be working as normal, that being a $10 weekly budget, in addition to the reserves that we had, which have been, mounting up fairly nicely, given the fact that we did skip 1 week and we had some prizes in previous weeks as well. So we're gonna actually just be making some very smooth, kind of simple changes to help alleviate some of the problems that we had in the deck previously. So the first thing is that I want to main deck a copy of Trap Trick, and I will be dropping the Foolish Burial from the list for this. The reason being is that there are times where I just draw too many monsters or miss my backjack, and I really feel like the trap ratio could be balanced a little bit more. It's not going to make a huge impact, but just including one more card, but it's getting closer to a 20-20 ratio, which I think is fine. It's not necessarily what I'm striving for exactly, but I think that's about where I want to be. And I think that Trap Trick, of course, just being a good catch-all, able to tutor out anything in my deck is pretty nice. The reason I'm only going for one of this as of right now is that I feel like playing multiples of it, obviously you don't want to see multiples of it in your hand, but moreover, I just think that it's really a card that will help toolbox what you're already doing. But if you're drawing a hand of multiple traps, you definitely want to be able to sequence them at your own leisure. Obviously, being able to search anything in your deck is really, really nice, but backjack also kind of fulfills that role as well. So I don't really feel like clogging on this card just yet. I might bump it up to 2, we'll see in the future, but we're going to test this out for now and just see how we enjoy it for the time being. And then the only change that I'm going to be making is going to be in the side deck, where I'm actually going to be dropping the playset of Lava Golem for 3 copies of Gamma Seal. I know this is not 3 copies of Gamma Seal. You can see the double Humongous under it, but for some reason, I don't own 3 copies of Gamma Seal. So I'm actually going to have to order that in person and, kind of just hopefully make this change for next week. But it shouldn't make a difference. Just functionally, they're kaijus. They all basically do the same thing in this build anyways. Both can be hit over by Dante, so that's definitely the most important thing, of course. This will actually be the first time that I'm buying cards for the series, which is kind of interesting to think about, since I have, in fact, this entire time been working with cards that I already own, which I do think makes a lot of sense for you guys. But yeah, I'm picking kaijus here over the Lava Golems that we had previously, simply because there are times when you Lava Golem but miss out on things like the Rhino Warrior effect or Graph or Seer or Tour Guide. Just there's a lot of really powerful normal summons that can, of course, be flexed into special summons in the form of the BAs, but really there are times you just want to get their effects instead of just using them as extenders, especially because we don't have Zeus yet. So I think that this is going to be a very suitable change, and it'll be flexible in certain matchups where they only leave 1 monster in the field anyways. I'm talking about things like, if Tri-Brigade ends on just Appaloosa, for instance. So I think that this is a very suitable change. Therefore, I think that this is going to round out the changes quite nicely, and we're just going to go and hop into the overall list again. So with there not being too many changes, I am going to breeze through this, as kind of usual. So we're going to go ahead and start with the main deck. It's 3 Tour Guide, 3 copies of Rhino, 3 copies of Graph, 3 copies of Skarm, the 3 copies of the Farfa. We have 2 copies of Seer. We have Alec, Barbar, Hcabe, and Libic, and finally Backjack, cutting the Foolish Burial from the list. For traps, we're on the 3 copies of Fiend Reefing, 3 Torrential, 3 copies of Dino Miscus. We have 2 copies of Phoenix Wing Windblast. We have the 3 compulsory evacuation device, 3 copies of breakthrough skill, and the newly added trap trick to round it out. The extra deck actually hasn't changed at all, so it's going to be 2 copies of Dante, the 1 Beatrice, the Break Sword, the Secret MVP Engineer. We have the 1 copy of Acid Golem for Xyz, and then for fusions, we have the 1 copy of the Pilgrim Dante, as well as the 1 copy of the El Shadow App Clone. And then finally, for the Link monsters, we have Gravity Controller, we have Carabini, we have Geonator Transverser, we have Nightmares Phoenix and Unicorn, we have Zeroboros, and finally the Boros Sword Dragon. And then rounding out the side deck right here, we have the 1 copy of Dino Wrestler Pancratops. We have 3 Kaijus, really just should all be Gamma Steel, but I think that functionally it'll be fine. We have the Shaddolls and the Dragon, as well as the Nail Shaddol Ariel. And then we have 3 copies of Shaddol Fusion. Still kind of testing around with this. This is probably going to get cut pretty soon, but for the time being, I think it's fine. And then we have 2 copies of Heavy Storm Duster, 3 copies of Anti-Spell Fragrance, and then 1 copy of Imperial Order. Now, as usual, guys, if you do want to help support the series by buying any of these cards that you see here or want to start your own budget journey, definitely feel free to use my TCG Player affiliate link, which you can find in the description box below, because every bit will help support the channel. And in a similar vein, if you guys are really big fans of this series, I would invite you to look at my Patreon and help support that as well, which you can find in the description box as well. And finally, if you guys are interested in utilizing your own custom designed sleeves or playmats, such as this right here, this little fella, gotta represent the Penguin Gang, of course. But yeah, if you guys really want a high quality product, I definitely would recommend checking out your playmat, which you can find the link to in the description box as well. I would absolutely wholeheartedly recommend them because I have had no complaints about these so far, and I've been using these sleeves for definitely many weeks by now, ever since the series started, to be honest. So whatever week this is, I think it's week 6, as I mentioned. Yeah, it's week 6. So I've been using these, and I've had literally no complaints. It's been awesome. It's been a great time. Everyone comments on them at least once at locals, so it's always cool to have that kind of personalization. And I think that if you guys are, fans of that kind of thing, which many of you guys are, definitely go ahead and check out your playmat. And don't forget to use my promo code Emanon10YP when you do. That way you can get 10% off of all of your purchases on the way. But let's not waste any more time and get started with some locals matches. Alrighty, everybody, welcome back to this week's locals matches, and we have a couple of interesting ones for you guys this time. So this is going to be round 2 up against Virtual World, and then the next match I have coming up for you guys is going to be round 3 up against Prank Kids. And I wanted to feature these decks in particular, or these matchups rather, because I think they're closer to what one would expect at a regional or more competitive tier event. Obviously, these are not necessarily the best decks in the format, but they are certainly closer to the forefront of the metagame, and I think that's, pretty good as far as allowing us to evaluate where the deck is progressing as a benchmark, right? Because that's kind of the goal of the series, is to see how the deck is on a competitive level. But you saw that we won the die roll, but even though we went first, we did kind of just break on trap cards, so we're just going to set 4 and pass. He's going to begin with a copy of Kowloon for a Chuche, and then targeting it with the Lily right there. I do decide to, in response, use a Dynamiscus to just banish it because, obviously you don't want your VW opponents to resolve their hand effects if you can help prevent it. So we're going to pitch the Graph, which is a very advantageous discard for us. And I kind of deliberate here between Skarm and Farfa because there's actually a world in which if you use your trap cards to proc your Dynamiscus Engrave, and get it on board. The BA is self-destruct, obviously, so that allows you to get an interruption that way, kind of sneak an extra one in there. But I really am kind of hurting for an engine card, so that's why I wanted to get Skarm to ensure that, we would kind of get our engine rolling. He's going to follow up with a copy of Triple Tactics Talent here to draw 2 cards, which is really, really good for him. Not too much I could have done there about that to play around it, because, again, I really just needed to interrupt and get my engine started at the same time. One thing you might notice is that I actually kind of decline at certain points to cut my opponent's deck here. I know most of the players in my locals were pretty good friends, and our locals is actually a very, very awesome community, so I don't really mind too much in this kind of environment, but I would definitely be a lot more vigilant at a more competitive event or against players that I may not know as well. But moving on here, yeah, he's going to be thinking for a little bit, but I think he just opts to pass because he doesn't really have too much else to do. That is kind of Virtual World sometimes where the deck is prone to bricking. I actually do enjoy the deck a bit myself, and I do want to play it some more, so maybe be on the lookout for that on the channel, just for series outside of this one. But we do draw another BA name. I believe that was Hcabe right there, so we're just going to go and normal summon it and then go for Dante. We hit a breakthrough skill, which ends up being important later, but we're just going to, for now, swing, and then I believe we just pass on a Skarm in the end phase here. So, yeah, again, not really able to establish Beatrice, which is unfortunate. We were hoping to hit a Rhino Warrior or a copy of Graph off of the Dante mills, but didn't really come to fruition. You notice that we searched the graph, and typically when we do this, that means that we did draw a discard trap. So that's kind of something to bear in mind. He has another copy of Kowloon for the Chuche, and we're gonna do the same thing again, where when he targets it with Lily, we're just gonna Dynamiscus to banish it right there. And this again procs our graph, so we're gonna pretty much do the same song and dance as last time. I like to not to chain the other Dynamiscus in grave because I just want to put up a defense since I'm not entirely sure if I can actually live this turn, but he has another copy of Triple Tactics Talent, so he's going to use that to draw even more cards. And then he's going to finally start to play a bit more here, so he's going to go Qinglong, and then GG target to the Qinglong to go and summon this summon itself, and then send a copy of Nian to graveyard. And then he's going to follow up with a copy of Lao. And I think I have a Fiend Griefing set, and I'm determining if I want to actually use it here. This is the only VW monster he can bring back with the Lao effect, but at the same time, I just wasn't sure what his play was necessarily, so I wanted to kind of wait off. Probably was worth it though to, I guess, use it. Although I think my thought process was also the fact that he could also just send Nian at a later time and then just bring it back with its own effect. So that's kind of why I held off there. He went ahead and used the Qinglong effect to search for Lulu, and then he's going to synchro off into the Shen. And Shen is what makes this matchup extremely unfavorable for Burning Abyss because it is not only a macro from field to grave, which matters a lot, but it's a recurable body that gives VW, or contributes to the VW grind game, and makes their grind definitely better than BA's, honestly. Just because they have so many forms to follow up, whereas with BA it really is just Seer Dante looping plus Scarm searches if you can access all of them. He's gonna go ahead and normal summon the Lulu actually, and then he's gonna trigger the Nian effect in grave, and this is where I decided to use the Fiend Griefing, just because that hard once return on the Nian and grave effect is why I decided to hold off on it. Maybe it was better to kind of again use it on the Lao because that would have kind of prevented him from going into Shen. Well, actually, no, it wouldn't have because he had GG on board. So I guess it didn't make a monumental difference. But we sent the Backjack off of the Fiend Griefing there, which, by the way, should be banished. I just forgot there. But Fiend Griefing being engraved normally doesn't matter too much. But yeah, excuse me on that one. But we go ahead and stack our deck with the Backjack right there. And now he's kind of deliberating his options. He has a lot of potential plays because he has a level 3 tuner and non-tuner, so he can go for synchro plays and Xyz plays. He opts for, I believe, the Fortune Tune right here, which is actually a card that I kind of disregarded. Not disregarded, but I just forgot about, to be honest, that this was a looming threat. And so, obviously, a lot of my traps definitely target, so that's a bit of a problem for me to deal with. He goes to battle phase, and he decides actually not to attack with the Fortune Tune, even though it looked like it. He just wants to take that play back. And again, it's locals, so I'm more lenient towards that kind of thing, because I view locals as more of a testing environment, especially when I'm playing this deck, right? So I think it's okay. Some people might not view it that way, but I mean, for me, locals is just kind of that environment, at least here especially, because again, most people just know each other by now, so it's not really that big of a problem. But on attack declaration on the Dante from the Shen, I'm going to breakthrough skill so the Dante goes to grave, so I can add back a graph, I believe that was. But he's going to go for his Zeus in main phase 2 since he did attack over the Dante, so his Xyz monster did battle. It doesn't have to be yours or the same one that you're trying to overlay with, so that's pretty good. He's going to go ahead and proceed to end phase, or rather, he's going to try to go to end phase, and then I'm going to go and use the Backjack in main phase 2, because I know that he's going to try and GG add back the Lao. And if I let him go to end phase, he can just resolve the GG freely, right? So that's why I decided to, in main phase 2, do this. But I actually forgot that he pitched a Xuanwu earlier from the Lulu, which means that he could actually just chain the Xuanwu right here in response to my Fiend Griefing. And this not only makes it so that the Lao stays in rotation, but it also makes it so that my Fiend Griefing can't send a Fiend because it has to successfully shuffle the target back in order for you to get the Foolish Burial off. So that was definitely a bit of a mistake on my end, but at the same time, he actually had no monsters in graveyard besides the Lao for me to shuffle back, so it was kind of hard for me to really get another chance to do so. But we're going to go ahead and move on here. I spent some time thinking before deciding to just go ahead and use the breakthrough skills that I have in grave. You saw the one that I made earlier coming in handy right here because they do get to negate both the Zeus and the Shen, so I get to play. That being said, though, I still have a lot of pressure on me because he has lots of follow-up. I'm pretty sure he already has a duplicate Qinglong in graveyard. And if not, he could just, at any time on his own turn, next turn, he could just Zeus send it if he really wants to. Plus, if I clear the Shen and get some to grave, it can come back as well. So he has a lot of different kind of follow-up plays that I know he has access to. And I'm pretty sure I know that the Lily is still in hand, so that is also a VW effect that I have to kind of contend with. So we are going to go ahead and normal summon this copy of Graph right here, and then we're going to go into Carabini. That triggers a Graph, so we're just going to try and link climb here. I don't really have a great avenue to really push for game because of the fact that I didn't have an additional body, because Toria by itself can get you to link forward, but it's kind of difficult to do that without burning through Seer. Like, your hand has to be kind of specific where you have just a spare BA to go ahead and special, or you can, like, I guess, send Libic off the Carabini, and that kind of works as well. But yeah, in this case, he had 2 monsters in defense position, so Borosword wasn't able to make a game anyways. So I had to really just try and do my best to clear the board to the best of my ability. So what I do here is actually use the Carabini, and I go and dump this copy of Barbar. So just trying to get in the burn damage where I can. Definitely important to do so in this build again, because you just really need to get in the damage at certain points when you're not always able to be the aggressor. And I think that Barbar definitely adds up over time, especially when you can, like, Dante add back and then summon it and have it self-destruct, or Seer bring it back and do the same thing. So definitely don't underestimate that, especially when you're playing as many BA names as this build is. But we're going to go for Unicorn and then Seer back to Dante. We're not going to use Unicorn because I'm going for Zero Boros, actually. And here's the first time we're summoning it in the series, I do believe. So we're going to Dante add back a BA. And I actually believe that I said during the game that I misplayed by adding back Graph off the Dante last turn. Because if I added back Farfa, I could have, gone for Graph off the Carabini and then added back like a different BA name. Like, it would have allowed me to just cycle through BAs a bit more efficiently, to where I could have probably procced the Scarm in the end phase as well. I'm actually not sure if that's my only Scarm. I'd have to kind of double check. I think I might have had one more, but in any case, he Nibiru's me right here before I get a chance to summon my BA and trigger the Zero Boros, which was definitely smart on his end, because now he gets his Shenshen engrave, and he has a whole bunch of just follow-up plays from there. So here the game is effectively over. The token is pretty big, but it's not really too hard for Virtual World to clear it. He's going to go and bash a couple of names to go ahead and bring back this Shenshen. And then, again, I'm pretty sure we already know that there's Lily up there in his hand, so not really a whole lot to be done about that. So that is pretty unfortunate news for us. We have to pass, like, we pass on no disruptions, so it basically is the end of the game. Yeah, there's the Lily right there. So the writing is pretty much on the wall here. I think he even just summons another VW to proc the Nian engrave. Yeah, he doesn't even bother activating Lulu right here. He's just going to go ahead and go for Vermilion, which I ask if he's just going to go Vermilion and pop the token, and we're going to just move on into game 2. So game 2, we're going to attempt to go first again and see if things end up a little bit better, but what do you know? It doesn't really, and we go ahead and set a couple of traps and pass. And it's funny because this was the episode that I added in Trap Trade, because I was saying, oh, I'm seeing too many monsters, because there were hands in a couple of other episodes, if you guys recall, where I literally drew 6 monsters, and now I'm just drawing no monsters. There are not enough monsters to really make it count, which is unfortunate, but that's kind of just the nature of variance, even though we are actually pretty close to just having a very balanced deck in terms of just the ratio of monsters to traps. It doesn't always work out that way. That's why probability doesn't always translate, which is unfortunate. Now, he starts off with Desires, and he actually has E-Telly, which is one of the cards that I was hoping not to see, because I do have a compulsory evacuation device set, but if I bounce it here, or bounce the Nian here when it goes to target with the Lily, it's just not going to matter too much, because he can just normal it, and then if he has another name, then he's going to play anyways. Now, granted, what I do here is kind of silly, and I definitely made a misplay, because right here he goes and sends Chuche, and then he lowers the level of Lily, so I know he can go for a Fortune Tune play, and once that hits the board, I basically can't stop Zeus whatsoever. And because I don't have like a breakthrough skill set or anything, I do have to respond to this. Otherwise, my board's just going to get wiped before he even really has to commit anything to the board. Because again, he hasn't used his normal summon yet, and he resolved Desires with drawing for turns. So he has a lot of resources to work with. So definitely forcing my hand a bit here. And I used the Phoenix Wing Windblast. I definitely should have used that on the Nian in response to the Lily, because I pretty much just let him get value for free when I didn't have to. So yeah, that was just kind of me getting thrown off by the E-Telly and being a bit too fixated on the fact that I had Compulse set, and I was kind of thinking a bit too much about that versus him being able to get his normal summon if I just bounced the Nian back to the hand, which was definitely a true, but I kind of disregarded the other cards that I had set, and I was kind of tunneled on that specific interruption. But you can see he has a Triple Tactics talent again after I pitched the Rhino Descend Scarm, so he's off to the races after resolving Qinglong. I think he just searched a Lulu right there. And Yeah, he goes and pitches the Nian. Obviously, I stacked on the top of his deck and he drew 2 cards, so that was one of the cards that he drew. But he had another one in hand anyway, so we had a lot of copies of Nian right here. And so I'm kind of in the same position again, right? Because he just normal summoned it. He didn't even use the Nian effect in grave because there's no point. Because literally he's forcing me into the same position where it's pretty much kind of just checkmate for me. So I decided to just go ahead and compulse it back to the hand. And at this point, I'm just kind of hoping that there's not really too much he can do. I'm just hoping that the last back row I have, which is a Torrential Tribute, can get me there. But yeah, that was not the best use of disruptions for sure. I definitely could have played that a bit more optimally. And kind of looking back at it, I really kind of was talking a lot about how, like in my mind at least, I was thinking about how bad the matchup is because of Shenshen, which is true, but that doesn't excuse the fact that, you know, these interruptions could have been used a lot better. He went ahead and used Olelo, and he also used Nian, and I think that was a good time to Torrential right there, because, you know, at some point he's just going to force through the back row via things like Vermilion and such. And so I just didn't really want that to go ahead and float and add back like tuners and such if he was able to get into that position. But he still had Lulu, which we did know about. Plus he had GG as well. So, or did he search that? I actually wasn't fully watching as I was commentating right there. But you kind of get the gist of what's happening. It's pretty much he had all the names because he drew off Desires and Triple Tactics Talent, and he opened quite well. And we did not time our disruptions super well. Granted, I don't know if... in the world where we did use their interruptions exactly how we should have, if that would have made a difference. And you saw that he drew off the Charge Warrior and a flash that he drew Chuche off of it, which pretty much just signals lights out. He's going to Xuanwu and pitch the 3rd copy of Nian from his hand to go and bring back the Lulu before going to Shenshen. And yeah, even just Shenshen Chuche pass, I mean, that's through 3 traps, and I pretty much just have nothing left. And he's going to attack me for some damage. And from here, yeah, again, I don't know if it would have changed everything too much because he still would have had Triple Tactics Talent to draw, and he would have been able to still have a lot of resources to play with, but definitely could have at least denied the Lily. So that would have been one less body for me to worry about. My Skarm gets Ash. I do draw a Tour Guide, which is nice, but it's not really going to amount to much because he's going to flip Chuche and then pop my Rhino Warrior, which will get banished because of the Shenshen, of course. And that is pretty much going to seal the deal right there. The last card in my hand is a Nail Shadow Aerial, as you're about to see. So yeah, we're going to go ahead and concede that one. We lose 0-2 to Virtual World. Now this matchup right here, as I mentioned before, is going to be up against Prank Kids. And this is another matchup where I think it's not really super favorable for us because of the fact that if we go first, it's usually pretty okay. We can generally stop their engine if they don't have like a crazy amount of extension, or if we just open well enough in general. But if they go first, they have a really good grind similar to VW. And I think that's a lot of the decks in the format right now, where most of the decks are kind of focused on not only setting up their board, but also just making sure that they have resources for the next play, which is stuff... It's just something that decks like Virtual World and Prank Kids and Tri Brigade and Drytron all really excel at. So that's pretty unfortunate because I think the BA engine kind of suffers from that if the engine that it's competing against is superior, and I think most of these engines, quite frankly, are, which is weird to say against a deck that was so notorious for grinding. But you saw anyways that we won the die roll again, which is pretty good. We've been getting lucky with those today. So we're gonna go ahead and make a high value Beatrice. He's gonna Cosmic and Samurai phase, and I apologize that I didn't actually get everything in frame here properly. I thought I did, but I actually didn't get to see what was banished, and I don't remember off the top of my head. But he is gonna just get rid of our back row and follow it up with a copy of Pranks, and I think he pitched Pandemonium because I remember thinking that that's an interesting pitch, since that normally is the way to play past disruptions. And he has to play against a Beatrice, but he played this pretty well because that's the only way he could have gotten additional Prank Kid name, since he only opened one other Prank Kid. So if he normal summons it, this is Roxy's, I believe. So if he normal summons it, he knows I'm just going to Farfa it, and then that's just going to be the end of his turn. But here he just tried to play around it as best as he could, so that was quite nice on his end. He does go ahead and trigger the Roxy's, and I think the Rocket Ride as well to chain block. So he's going to banish, I believe that was Effect Failure out of his hand, and then he's going to go and summon out Fansies here after drawing a card. And this is where I do decide to just go and fire this Beatrice. We're going to detach the Farfa that we initially used to make her, and then we're going to send this copy of, I believe, Backjack to the graveyard. And this is kind of where you want to be, because your opponent has to really respect the fact that not only can your Beatrice send anything, but there already is the Farfa underneath it. So it doesn't matter if they have Ash or like a way to negate it. The Farfa is going to resolve regardless. So we go ahead and banish the Fansies till the end phase, and then we're going to go and see what we can hit off of this backjack. So really, we're just going to try and get set up because I'm fairly convinced that there's not too much extension. The only real thing you could do is normal summon another prank kid. And then all I really have to do is make sure that the backjack hits something that's impactful enough. Obviously, that's not within my control, but the odds are pretty good because a lot of the traps in this deck are good against, the prank kids, just because we hit stuff like this compulse right here. So we're just going to compulse the drop seeds that he normally summons back to his hand. He's going to attack me directly for 1,000 due to the rocket ride. But from here, he can't really do too much. I know the card in his hand, and the Fansies is coming back, so I'm pretty much playing unopposed on my next turn, which is good. And I also stacked the deck with Backjack, so this is pretty much how the script is written for this deck. You pretty much want to set up your Beatrice plus whatever back row, high value Beatrice being one of the best ways to do so, especially since, again, we're not on like Dragoon or IP or anything just yet. So yeah, we're going to go and follow up with a tour guide that we did use, or search rather, off of the Scarm that we pitched on turn 1. And we're going to go for this copy of Graph. And I have to read his cards because they are all foreign. So shout out to you, Gabe, if you're watching this. This is why foreign cards are... They're nice, definitely, for sure. But it's kind of a pain when you have to always pull out translations or keep them on hand, which is why I don't use them myself. But props to those who do, because then you really have to know what your cards do, right? But moving on here, we're going to go for Carabini. And then we're going to trigger the Graph for Farfa, and then we're going to go for Carabini effect. That's going to go and send us a copy of Seer to the graveyard, which does trigger to bring back the Scarm, just in case the game goes longer. But again, I know everything that I have to work with, so we're going to Farfa, banish the Fancy, switch Beatrice to a tap position, and then just clear the board for game 1. So again, that is pretty much what the deck is supposed to do, is that we can end the game as early as turn 3 if we just are able to set up, disrupt our opponent, and then kind of proceed to OTK with Tour Guide follow-up. But of course, we now have to contend with our opponent going first, and that is never a good sign when your deck can't really, or isn't currently playing any hand traps. So he is opening up with the copy of Place, and that's going to search for the copy of Lampsies right there. And he's going to start off again with Polymerization, just playing as if I did have interruptions, even though I'm fairly certain he knows that I don't have any hand traps in this deck. But he's going to go ahead and trigger both the Prank Kids, one of them being a Lampsies, I do believe. And the other one being a Roxy's. So he's going to go and get his draw and then summon a couple of Prank Kids from the deck. And he's going to go, I believe, for the double Dropsies. That way he can just go for Toad. So again, really respecting as if, there is the possibility of hand traps, which can appreciate for sure, just because I think that's good, kind of practice on his end as well. So with that, of course, he's going to go for the Rocket Ride, and that's going to allow him to bring back more Prank Kids names from the graveyard to kind of keep extending here. I don't think he actually had another Prank Kid in his hand to normal summon, or maybe I'm not remembering this game correctly. I don't believe so, though. I think we see Cosmic and Effect Veiler in the hand, with the other 3 cards, of course, being the combo pieces to start off. But yeah, he's going to go and link off into Dodo, and that's going to trigger the Dodo effect, so he's going to add from deck to hand, I believe, the Pandemonium. And that's pretty good setup because of the fact that he's just going to be able to go for a Washer setup. He doesn't have a way to make Battle Butler, but he doesn't really have to. Because I think something that a lot of Prank Kids players have started to figure out as of late is that just controlling with Washer is generally pretty good, especially if you can back it up with your non-ninja defensive cards, and if you set up Toad like this right here, it's pretty good because your opponent probably can't kill you through Washer, since obviously your monsters can't be killed in battle that turn, or the ones you bring back at least. So that's definitely a good defensive kind of setup, and then you can just overwhelm your opponent with the grind with just continual advantage. And that's, again, kind of why I think that the BA deck would struggle pretty heavily in this matchup if the Prank Kid player is allowed to just fully pop off going first. And with no hand traps, that's pretty likely to happen. But you see that we also didn't open too bad. Obviously, having both Graph and Rhino does, put a damper on our plays, but not too much, especially going second right here. And I kind of deliberate on if I want to use Dante, but I decide against it because I actually have another copy of Graph in my hand, I believe, which I will use to pitch for Beatrice. And so I don't want to risk the Dante just getting hit off the board when it doesn't really have to be. Yes, it could force Toad, but my mindset was to just try and attack over the Toad. However, I actually kind of forgot that not only could the Washer come down, but also the Place effect would boost every monster on the field presently at the time. So that's actually going to boost the Toad to 2700 attack, which makes it bigger than Beatrice, obviously. So that's definitely something that I kind of didn't consider at the time. I just forgot that the Place was on the field. So that was definitely my mistake for sure, because that certainly was It might have been worth it then to use the Dante to try and see if Toad would have negated it. But if this was his intention the entire time, to use the washer or go for the washer play at the end of main phase one, that definitely would have. I think it would have ended up the same regardless. So he wouldn't have had any pressure or onus to use the Toad as a negation. And here I'm just reading another translation just to make sure. So yeah, he I believe just burned me and didn't opt to use the Roxy's that he used as a fusion material. So just trying to get the ones. Or I think he might have also tried to preserve the card in his hand, which is fair because I'm pretty sure it was a hand trap. But yeah, now I'm kind of in a bit of a weird spot. Like I have this Beatrice, but she's kind of under threat because the attack boost from place is permanent. So I do have to kind of make a move pretty fast here. And there's a couple of ways I can approach this. The one way I could do it is to play it safer and just kind of rely on the Beatrice getting 2 more interruptions on the next turn and then following up with a couple of my defensive cards. But I really just wanted to make sure that I had a way to clear the Toad because I think it would have been hard to do so if I kind of just left the Beatrice on board. Because Toad represents a lot of pressure as far as like what I'm able to do to kind of trade for his resources because I'm on the back foot here for sure. And when I go and try and crash with the Weather Washer because I believe they're both 25, he's just gonna tag out in response to bring back the Lampsies and the Dodo. And then here is where I'm thinking, all right, I could just stick to the previous plan, which was just to keep the Beatrice as an interruption. But I decided to actually go and crash into the Toad, which will get Beatrice into the graveyard so I can summon out Pilgrim and then attack over the Toad at least. Which I think was, it was a decision that I'm still not entirely sure, even in hindsight, if it was correct or not. Because obviously the Beatrice would have represented a couple of interruptions. I would have had, like things like Graph triggering on my opponent's turn because it can't trigger this turn, obviously, since I specialed it. I would have had the Rhino, of course, and then the Beatrice Send. So like you would have had to have negated something among those, I feel. And like if not, then I could have just used Graph to summon Farfa to get the Toad out of there anyways. So maybe it was worth it to keep the Beatrice on board. But the way I did it was to make it so that Beatrice would crash. I would get the Rhino here to go and send Backjack. And I chained it in such a way where he wasn't really incentivized to negate anything because I did Dante chaining 3 to add back. And he didn't really feel like it was worth negating it. So we're just going to go and send a copy of Backjack right here. And out comes Pilgrim pretty soon, which is 2800, so it does trade with the Toad. So that was kind of my initial objective. So despite what I just said, I think that this was also not a terrible decision because it was going to force out Toad no matter what. I kind of didn't really think too much about the fact that Toad could simply just negate the Backjack, which actually interfered with the player a lot because it not only stacks the deck for your trap that you want to hit off the Backjack effect, but in this case, it stacks your deck for what you can draw off of your Pilgrim. Right, so like you can go, Pilgrim Chainlink 1, Backjack Chainlink 2, just to get the trap off, and then you can draw into whatever other card you want to. It's usually better if you can do it with hand traps in mind, but just in general, that's kind of something to note. But he's gonna get his add back off Toad, and I'm pretty sure that I actually used the Pilgrim Dante to attack into Dodo for damage, and I think that was actually the bigger mistake was that I didn't just clear the Fansies because I forgot that that was not the one that he didn't bring back that one with the Weather Washer, so it actually could be destroyed by battle. And you're about to see why that matters in a bit. He's going to end phase Cosmic Me. Again, I don't think we get to see what that is. Yeah, we don't, but I'm pretty sure that was a copy of Dynamiscus set, because I'm pretty sure my sets were double Dynamiscus and Torrential. So he's going to draw for turn, and this is why not clearing the Fansies mattered, was that I was kind of expecting an Axis Code play, and that like maybe I can just Dynamiscus banish it, but he actually goes for Roaster, and I completely forgot about this card, to be honest. So yeah, if he didn't have the Fansies, he would have actually had to commit his normal summon, and that would have been pretty good for me because I would have felt pretty comfortable Torrentialing there. But here now it's kind of awkward because he gets to trigger all his prank hits, and then like even if I clear the board, he's gonna just have a normal summon to just go into Meow Meow and just do all of his plays anyways. So I think this is where I messed up the most, was that I just didn't clear the Fansies when I had the chance to, because I was again not really considering the fact that Washer wasn't protecting that one specifically. So that definitely was a mistake on my part. He's gonna go and trigger his Fansies there, sending a copy of Pranks and summoning out the copy of Dropsies. And then the other one was a Lampsies, I'm pretty sure. So he's gonna burn me for 5 and then summon out another Prank Kid. And like I still have a window to Torrential, like that's fine, but now I'm really relying just on this Backjack triggering. And like not triggering, but like hitting a trap that is guaranteed And because he actually used Toad to negate it last turn, I actually did not get to stack my deck, so I do not know what I could hit with this backjack. So really, like if I don't torrential here, he's just gonna roaster clear my back row anyway. If I do torrential here, I mean he's gonna chain it, and then I also lose my pilgrim, so I'm gonna have to use it anyways. So just kind of thinking about the order about the order in which I want to do this, and realistically, it's not going to make a gigantic difference because I already messed up. So that definitely is unfortunate, but again, these are kind of things that are pretty hard to learn if you don't actually actively run into these interactions, because these control matchups, I think the hardest part about control mirrors is the fact that, like not even like pure control, but like just resource advantage. I hate using the term mid-range, but I guess that applies here. But yeah, these kinds of matchups, you run into a lot of situations where like they come up specifically when you're playing, and not necessarily just if you're trying to like theorycraft everything. Whereas like in specific combo matchups, I think sometimes it can be easier just because you kind of know what the deck is designed to do. Like for example, if you're against Drytron, right? Like specific choke points, the niche interactions like that don't come up as often. Not saying they can't, but just think that like for this kind of ordeal, it definitely comes up a lot more. You notice I actually forgot to trigger the graph there when I pitched it off the Pilgrim, and I have no idea why I forgot. I guess I just literally didn't remember. But I don't think it would have made a huge difference anyways, especially when we missed with the backjack. We hit Seer, so that's pretty unfortunate because, yeah, now his normal summon dropsies that we knew about is just going to go ahead and pretty much go in. So my hands are tied. I don't really have anything going for me at the moment. Obviously, we're not on hand traps, so I have 0 disruptions left. So this is pretty much looking like an L from this position. And realistically, I probably should just scoop after that, like after the backjack missed. So that definitely was unfortunate. But I don't scoop for a while here, so he's just going to play out his turn. Yeah, he spends quite some time thinking about it, but he's just trying to think about the best way to make sure that his resources are online and are in a continual flow, I suppose, right? Because again, Prank Kid really is a deck that just tries to outgrind the opponent a lot of the time if they're not like blowing the opponent out immediately, which in this case, that definitely is happening. So he's gonna go Dodo right there, and then he's gonna trigger the effect of Dodo here. So that's gonna search for, I think it might have been Pranks. No, it's gonna be Pandemonium. He sent Pranks earlier, I believe, with the Fansies. So yeah, that is, he's pretty much all set up to where he wants to be. He's gonna add back said Pranks off the Dodo effect, and then he's gonna add back another Prank Kid. So yeah, this deck, it gets out of hand very fast. Obviously the board right now isn't anything crazy because it's actually just gonna pass on no monsters. But like we know the looming threat of what can occur. Like we know that if he is able to just put back his washer and recycle it, and just reuse it next turn, like there's pretty much no way I'm beating that grind. Because again, like BA's grind is definitely not to the capacity of a lot of these decks nowadays. So that's why you see a lot of the BA decks running stuff like Dragoon, right? Because it just amounts so much offensive pressure that you can end games quicker. You don't have to rely on just trying to sit behind a Seer Dante loop. Because sitting behind a wall in this deck, again, just isn't really as effective when you have decks that are just able to put so many follow-ups in, like as part of their play string, as part of their game plan. So he's gonna shovel back 3 and draw 1 as well. So now that he has Pranks online as well, like he's never gonna run out of resources. So yeah, we really just are not in a good spot. And he's gonna Veiler my tour guide on top of that, which is not really the greatest thing. So I have one more trick up my sleeve right here, and we're gonna go and try to end main phase. So the cool thing, by the way, is that you don't have to specifically say you're entering battle phase. You just have to declare that you're leaving the main phase. Because you can go from main phase 1 to either the battle phase or straight to the end phase, you don't actually have to specify if you're declaring that you're switching phases. So yeah, he does use the Pandemonium as a result of that in main phase 1 still. And this gives me a window to actually use the last card in my hand after he resolves the entire chain, which is Shaddoll Fusion. And you see that we sided that in here. But yeah, he goes ahead and reads it. And this is where he realizes that if he just chains the Weather Washer, he won't have an extra deck monster on the field anymore. And even if he brings back like the Links from Grave, they weren't special from the extra deck, right? So in that way, Shaddoll Fusion won't be able to resolve. And as soon as he chains it, I just go ahead and scoop up my cards. So we lose game 2 there, which I mean, I think is to be expected in this matchup where Prank Kids going first, if uninterrupted, are going to just establish all the resources, and they're just going to be able to outgrind you in a lot of cases. So that was unfortunate, and we're going to go first. And we don't have a way to beat Beatrice again. This is like the third game you've seen this, and it's really unorthodox, especially because we have so many BAs in our deck. He's going to go ahead and select a couple of cards after we flip Anti-Spell, and we're just going to go into battle phase because it is somewhat close to time here. I actually didn't respect time enough. I should have just used my face down Torrential on the normal summon. I instead use it after the resolution of the effect of the Dropsies right here, which I think normally would have been okay, but when it came to time, I definitely should have just Torrential on normal summon. But he's gonna go to end phase. We're gonna activate Fiend Griefing just to try and send Scarm so we can play next turn, because this is pretty much our only option. But yeah, he realizes that sending is part of the effect, so he's gonna Ash that, and that is very bad. Now we're pretty much on top deck mode, because I'm gonna tell you right now, the cards in our hand are not good. We draw a Seer, which is not one of the better cards, but it at least is a monster, so it puts some damage on board. We are just going to set another card, and then we're going to pass. He's going to just flip with the place, and I actually don't have any more interruptions, as you'll see not too long from now, because again, this is fairly close to time, so we're going to concede pretty fast here. This is just a bit of a spoiler, but yeah, he's going to go ahead and search his Lampseas. He's going to normal summon it, and then he asks like what the attack stat of the Seer is again, because it's actually deceptively big, or not deceptively, but kind of randomly big compared to at least the most of the Prank Kid lineup. But yeah, he is just asking if the set that I have right there was from turn 1, or if it was from the most recent turn, and it was from the most recent turn. So yeah, he's just gonna go ahead and flip with the Polymerization he had set, so he's able to really just do all sorts of things. But yeah, you saw my hand was triple Anti-Spell with 2 other traps, so we lose that. So we are back from locals for week 6 right here, and we did manage to actually go 2-2 overall, so not quite as terrible as the video might suggest, but I did want to feature those losses in particular because of the fact that I think they do a fantastic job of showcasing the weaknesses of the deck right now. So we'll kind of talk more towards that, or more about that towards the end right here. But we did, in fact, of course, go to locals. So here is our singular OTS pack for entry. So let's go ahead and hopefully pull another ulti, perhaps. Probably not, but let's go ahead and just see what we got right here. Maybe the worst thing about this is that I don't get to open these at locals anymore, because I do have to save them until I, get to record these at home. But yeah, it kind of is just kind of the compromise. But we got a Stardust Flash. Oh, gotta make sure I'm in frame. We have Stardust Wish, and then we have Drytron Delta, so definitely not too bad. But I do want to go over, again, the 3 key takeaways for this video, because I actually think we did learn a lot in this episode specifically. So the first one is the fact that, again, technical play really matters a lot, especially when you're playing on a budget. And I did kind of mention this already in a previous episode, but I do want to touch a bit more on it here. So you saw in the games that we featured today that many of the mistakes that I made were not really because of budgeting reasons. Yes, it's true that if you are able to access different cards, you're going to draw, generally better combinations of things that will help against your opponents if you're specifically preparing for certain matchups. That's true, but if you're playing from a limited resource pool, you really have to maximize the efficiency of what you have and what you're playing with. So you really have a much smaller window and a much smaller margin for error. So those games really did showcase that, things such as me not using my interruptions properly against Virtual World Game 2, or, not really attacking over the Fansies against Prank Kids Game 2 when I really should have, or, even like certain decisions that you have to make in game. For example, should I leave a Beatrice or should I crash it to, get the Pilgrim Dante and get some more value on my turn immediately? Versus holding out and trying to play past the toe negation. These are things that, again, are kind of independent from budget purposes. And I'm not going to pretend like budgeting isn't a big factor for this game, of course. But when you are playing under these given constraints, these are certain things that you really have to be focusing on rather than, just using the budget as kind of a scapegoat, right? So I will say that my losses were mostly my own fault. And I didn't even ever think about the fact that, I really wish that I had Ice Dragon's Prison in this spot, or I really wish I had Solemn Strike. Sure, they would have been nice maybe if I were to think about it a bit more after the fact, but in the game, I really am just trying to focus on the cards that I have. And I think that if you are a budget player yourself, that's the mindset that you should try and adopt as well. But the second thing is kind of the fact that these matchups against these grindy decks in this current format are really, really not favorable. It does suck to say, but it really just kind of is the case. A lot of these decks have ways to really outpace the BA deck, which is kind of something I've been reiterating time and time again, where these decks really just have a focus on setting up their board, but also making sure that their grave is stacked or their hand is stacked or whatever the case may be that allows them to really just play, even if their entire board gets cleared. So that really is unfortunate because BA doesn't have as many of those luxuries. So I really do have to try and figure out ways to really stop my opponents when they get to go first, because in those cases, it really isn't pretty. And even though we actually went first in a lot of our games today, we didn't really manage to come out on top in a lot of those cases either, which is unfortunate, but that is kind of just the nature of things. And the final thing is that I really just need go second cards in general, which kind of ties into the previous part. But realistically, I really, really want to have some way to clear boards maybe. And you might want to tune in next week and see what decisions we come to in terms of how we're going to fix those problems. But that's going to be it for this episode, guys. Thank you so much for supporting as usual. Feel free to check out all my links in the description. And until next time, I will catch you in the next video. See you guys.